So we're in John in a series on miracles. And first we did 7 I am statements, and we've jumped back to the beginning of the book, and we're covering 7 miracles that occurred. So I had the graphics team make this timeline for us. Across the bottom were the I am statements. I'm the bread of life. I'm the light of the world, etc., etc. We are in John chapter 5 there. The handicap symbol of the man sitting in the wheelchair is the story we'll be in tonight. So we are before any of the I am statements have occurred yet. I hope that was helpful to you. And we're in John 5. You just read it together. And we're going to pick up in verse 1 again and kind of work our way through it. Sometime later, this is after he had healed the official's son, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now he's in town because there's a big reason to be. There's a festival. Perhaps it's Passover. It's not declared in the text, but we might guess that it would be that. Now there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Now, this archaeological site has been discovered, and those 5 covered areas actually do surround the pool, and it's a pretty gracious space for the gathering, the throng of ill that we heard about in the passage already, for them to sit in the shade around the pool as they waited for the stirring of the waters. It says here, a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. Now, do you notice, just looking at the text on the slide, anything missing? We go 1, 2, 3, 5. We missed 4. Why did we miss 4? Well, let's pull up 4, okay? We're missing verse 4 because the verse isn't in the oldest textual record that we have. So it's a verse that didn't show up in the textual record until about 400 years after the rest of this book was written. So that makes us maybe a little suspect. However, I do want to look at it because it helps make sense of some of the really weird and strange things that are said later in the passage. So let's look at this together. It says the lame, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed, and they waited for the moving of the waters. The Pool of Bethesda had an underground stream that from time to time something would kind of bubble up in the middle, or there would be a sudden gush of water up into the middle. And the urban legend that had kind of come up around this, the superstitious but oft repeated story, was that an angel of the Lord would come down and stir up the waters. And the first one into the pool after each such disturbance would be cured of whatever disease they had. Now, it's not that we don't believe in angels or demons or of supernatural causes of illness or supernatural cures. It's just that this text wasn't what John wrote down. We think it's something that somebody added for clarification a little while along the road. I'm grateful that in your text, probably it's a footnote and not in the main text. One commentary called the situation, they said it would be a situation that would be most cruel to those gathered around, the most cruel contest for many ill people. But again, we're looking at it to make sense of the strange conversation that follows. We pick back up in verse 5. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. That's a lifetime. Who here is younger than 38 years old? You can start a career and a family and bring home a grandbaby in 38 years. It's a lifetime. In January, I attempted to touch a basketball, which was a terrible decision. It's a terrible sport, should have never been invented. But I attempted to play basketball in the driveway with my nephew and shredded the ACL in my right knee. Okay, just hit the ground. And in February, had reconstructive surgery. And one of the things they warned me about was when you're going to be around a lot of people, especially kids, you need to carry a walker with you as a physical barrier so that everyone knows, hey, please don't side tackle or hit or whatever else. And so I came in to service a few weeks. I only had to do it for a few weeks, but I came into service early in my recovery, and I felt self-conscious. I felt embarrassed, and I sat down from someone who I think I should have been curious with earlier. It took me way too long to talk to her. Her name's Chris Austin. I really like the Austin family. I've known the kids before I've known the parents, but Taylor just graduated this last weekend. He was one of the first volunteers I had when I was leading 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. His sister, Kate, has served up there faithfully for years as well. Kelly, you will find him at any opportunity that he can find to serve. He's just got a giant heart to love his church well. And then Chris. And I want to share a little bit of Chris's story humbly tonight. 20 years ago, Chris was pregnant with Kate. And during this pregnancy, she was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And during this early phase, she managed the pain with a lot of medication, but also steroids. And she was eventually able to wean off the medication, the pain management medication, but the steroids that kept inflammation down, she couldn't step away from those. And if you know anything about medicine, steroids have their own set of complications that come with them. So it was in this time, though, that she moved to Northwest Arkansas, is raising 2 little ones, bought a veterinary practice, so she's a veterinarian by trade, and began just the juggling of hidden chronic illness along with everything else. And she would say at this time that God sustained me through this time. Her pain was well managed, and the flare-ups by this point were not the norm. But 10 years ago, it came back with a vengeance. So steroids continued to be needed, along with now a constant rotation of pain management medication, always trying to stay one step ahead. And it was in this time that the doctors also discovered she has total degeneration of all the cartilage in her body. So she's had surgeries and treatments on knees and ankles and feet. And within the past 6 months, it's begun attacking her back. And the steroid doses to try to get it in control are higher than she's comfortable with, but it's the only thing that's doing anything. It's gotten to the point, though, where it's difficult even to move unassisted. The first time that she needed to bring a walker to church, she confessed she snuck in the side door, and she left as soon as the service ended. She knew she needed to be here. The gathering of the saints and the worship of God was something that she, deep in her soul, knew that she needed, and yet, it's just, I'm embarrassed. She struggles with self-worth and self-image. There's a great challenge, she told me, in invisible illnesses, because when people see her and see her walker, they just think, well, it's because of my size, she said. But they aren't aware what's going on in her body, and it's led to people being nasty and judgmental. One client even requested to see another vet because as she rolled around on a stool, they found that unprofessional. She couldn't stand, and they didn't think highly of that. She told me it's a lonely place. She's lost people who've not understood. She's been broken, and there are tears. He's faithful, but the question why has gone unanswered. I think she might have some vision of what the man laying by the pool feels. I was grateful for some firsthand testimony. We pick up in verse 6. When Jesus saw the man lying there and learned that he'd been in this condition, or understood that he'd been in this condition for as long as he had been, a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" Now, first read feels like this is a fairly audacious question. Like, if this is the bedside manner of a doctor that visited me in a hospital, I would say, no, thank you. Please, send me someone who has some tact or something. But I think it's a question that comes as a gift. Do you want to get well? As one commentary put it, the question was designed to focus the man's attention on Jesus. A man who's looked over time and again. I'm actually looking at you. Will you look back at me. And that same commentary continued. In the spiritual realm, man's great problem is that either he does not recognize that he is sick or he does not want to be cured. People are often happy, for a while at least, in their sins. So, do you want to get well? Is the question that he has graciously asked every single one of us. The entirety of humanity, he lays the question in front of us, and he says, you'll die in your sins and face judgment. Do you want to get well? Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me in the pool when the water is stirred. When I'm trying to go in, someone else goes down ahead of me. I think this man has a clearer gospel picture than I do. This is a man who says, in his desperation, I think it's a question that should have inspired hope, but it doesn't seem to. He's been 38 years too slow. He says, I want it, but I can't do it by myself. And is that not the essence? He has to rely on someone else to carry him into the water. I can't do it are such holy words. I can't do it. I need someone else, God on high, to do it on my behalf. The activities, though, of so many of my days, if I look at my calendar or phone usage at the end of the day or whatever else, it betrays the fact that I must be convinced that my spirit will be good with God if I can just drag myself into the waters. And self-reliance, I fear, is damning my spirit. Then Jesus said to him, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. And at once, the man was cured. He picked up his mat and he walked. And he walked away from the community of outcasts gathered at the pool, others still waiting for their turn. He walked away from 38 years of being overlooked. He walked away from his own atrophied muscles. As I consider the people standing around seeing this miracle, those who are well versed in the Old Testament, I have to imagine that the words of Isaiah were flooding to mind, because when the Messiah comes, the promise says in Isaiah 35, the lame will leap like deer. This man's laid there for 38 years and he's suddenly sprung to feet. And I can't imagine that he sulks away slowly. I have to imagine that there's some pep in this man's step. The Messiah is in their midst. Now, the day on which this took place was a Sabbath. There's a begged question here before we get too far into it. The Jewish leaders are watching, and we have a hope of how they might respond. This Old Testament verse coming to mind of the lame leaping like deers. We're waiting for the Messiah. Perhaps he is in our midst. And this is what it does. The day on which it took place was a Sabbath. This day that God had given his people. It's a gift of a day. It's a gift of a day. You work and you work and you work. And then I want you to rest. Rest from your work and be with me. And there's this point of tension building. And verse 10 continues, so the Jewish leaders said to the man who had been healed, it's the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat. Have they even seen this man? Have they seen him? Have they seen him by the pool? Have they seen him ceremonially unclean and pushed out of the covenant community? Have they seen him restored to health and standing in front of them? They seem to be like the leadership in another story that Jesus tells, the story of the Good Samaritan. And the ones that should have looked are the ones that stepped furthest away and crossed on the other side of the road for fear that they would look too long and would see and would feel like they needed to do something about it. Now, God gave the Sabbath commandment in the Mosaic Law to rest on the seventh day. Honor the Sabbath. Remember it, honor it as holy. And it's the newer layers of law that have been added. We don't want to break this law, so let's put some few rules back here, right? The fence line's here, your property line, but we probably ought to back off a little bit before we do anything else over here. And they've so backed off to the point where it's absurd. And this man, for fear of being stoned to death, is going to have some replies, because the consequence of carrying a mat from a public place to a private place when the day is for rest and not for work is public stoning, execution. Just absurdity. And it makes me think, brothers and sisters, may we never be a people who miss God working in our midst because our hearts are bent around our rules and our priorities. The Sabbath is a central conflict for Jesus and Jewish leadership. In John 9, he heals a blind man on the Sabbath. In Mark 3, he heals a person's shriveled hand on the Sabbath. In Luke 13, he heals a woman crippled for 18 years on the Sabbath. In Luke 14, he heals a man with dropsy on the Sabbath. And in Mark 2, there's the peculiar story where his disciples are picking grain on the Sabbath, and they're, again, upset. All of these are producing in the leadership a violent reaction, and it's driving us toward his eventual execution at their hands. Picking up in verse 11, he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk,' as if to say, 'I'm just doing what I was told. Please don't stone me. This is the best day of my life. Don't make it the worst day of my life. Please.' So they asked him, 'Who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk?'" These leaders who study the scriptures, who are waiting for God to be among them, they see embodied in front of them the Christ, the Jehovah Rapha, which is an Old Testament name from the days of the Exodus wilderness. It's the God who heals. And embodied in front of them in Christ is the God who heals. And you see, the man said two things. The man who weighed me well, and pick up your mat and walk. He told me to do something. And they completely disregard the man who made me well. They don't even acknowledge that some miracle has taken place. They just said, "Who told you to pick up your mat and walk?" They miss it entirely. Now, the man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. And I don't understand that, really. It makes me think of like those gruesome car wreck stories where someone's like, "I would have died if this person that just showed up didn't save my life," and they disappeared. I have no idea who they were. So maybe that's what's going on here, is this like guardian angel kind of, I don't know where he came from, but he was just the right person at the right time. Maybe, but it is curious that he slips away only to, in the following verses, purposefully then go back to the man and seek him out and have another conversation. There's something purposeful here that Jesus is driving toward. It says, later Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning or something worse may happen to you." Again, another weird statement that at first pass feels like this strange, either a threat or like, are you saying that I'm sick because I sinned or somebody else sinned and that's why I'm sick? But I think we have to read this statement in the context of the rest of the story, because it comes right after he has condemned the Jewish leadership's legalism. So it can't mean do the right thing or I can't wait to catch you and punish you. Can't mean that. And it comes right after the gracious question of, do you want to get well? It's a prompt for growth. I know your physical illness was bad, but sin's consequences are worse. I don't know how you would fill in the blanks in that sentence, but I know what? Your work, your relationships are what? Stressful or hard? Whatever it is that's dragging you away or dragging you down or burdensome to your heart, I know that this thing in your life is hard, but sin's consequences are infinitely worse. Don't seek reprieve from the pain of this thing in sin. It's just going to make it worse. I think it was a gracious thing for him to say this here. Now, throughout the series up to this point, we've come back to John himself's summary statement of the whole book of John. Why is he writing these signs or these miracles? And he says, the reason that I've done this, why signs? Well, it's because these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. The sign is given so that we may believe, so that we may say, yes, I want to get well. It's tempting to think about this passage in the context of the next 100 years, of him healing our bodies and sustaining us through our days in our lives. And we'll revisit this 100-year thing, but I wanted to take a totally tongue-in-cheek diversion here. I think it's going to frame up the rest of the night here for us. There's a song that I love about a man who befriends in the park a woman in a wheelchair. They just meet for the first time, and they encounter throughout the course of the adventure of the day, time after time of circumstances just really working against this woman just for the sole fact that she's in a wheelchair. And the song ends with the woman addressing the man, and it ends this way. She says, anyway, I look at it this way. In 50 years, you'll be in worse shape than I am now. See, we're all the same, this human race. Some of us are called disabled. And the rest of you, well, the rest of you are just temporarily able-bodied. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Temporarily able-bodied. The next 100 years will see everyone in this room put in the ground or scattered to the wind. Every single one of us. I know there's a couple babies in here that might break that, but the odds are in my favor here. And yet Ecclesiastes 3 has told us that he has set eternity in our hearts. Eternity. We long for the good of his kingdom come. And we long for his will done here as it is in heaven. We long for things to be made right. We long for everything to be as it is supposed to be. My wife, Kara's grandmother, as her health was declining and, issue after issue before she finally passed away, she told us, old age is preparing me for eternity. The things I value on earth, like my body, my ability to take care of myself, are being taken away. And the things I value in heaven are becoming more significant and more sweet. That sounds like someone who has answered Jesus' question, do you want to get well, with a resoundingly clear yes. And I think Chris Austin is another one. I've been knocked flat by her quote all week long. She told me, it's easy to forget how much strength comes from falling to your knees. God's really come through there for her, faithfully, time and again, bringing a song or a verse to mind, a comfort, not the healing that would obviously be, something to celebrate and enjoy. But she says he's shown up time and again by being my comforter, by being near to me. And she offered this verse, which I think is just a beautiful place to end tonight out of 2 Corinthians. We're going to pray it kind of as a closing prayer together. Therefore, we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, God, our bodies are so fragile. Inwardly, yet, we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, because it's all perishing, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary. Temporarily able-bodied we are, but what is unseen. And may it be so, Lord, we pray.